Hello, we are Team 5. Today we are going to discuss greenhouse gas emissions, climate change, and who should be responsible. In our research, we adopted 5 different datasets and used Tableau Prep for data processing and dataset combination. Then we used Tableau for data exploration and visualization. This dashboard extracts all the works of our research so that you can have an overview of our findings in the dataset. In our research, we discussed 6 core questions. What is the current situation of carbon dioxide emission and climate change? What countries emit carbon dioxide most recently and totally in the past? What countries have the greatest per capita emissions? What is the relationship between wealth and carbon dioxide emission? And finally, who should take responsibility and how? Now our team will introduce every part in details. Let's first take an overview of the current situation of carbon dioxide emission and climate change. Global warming is directly attributable to human activity, specifically to our burning of fossil fuels. And we can see the rise of global average temperature accelerates as carbon dioxide emission increases. This also caused the extent of sea ice to shrink, thus leading to the sea level rise. IPCC warns that we must limit global warming to 1.5 degrees by 2040 to avoid severe catastrophes, but we still have a lot to do to reverse the trend.
To explain the countries that emit the most carbon dioxide today, I mainly use the total carbon dioxide emissions data from the 2019. Before the visualization, I did some data cleaning using the filter function. To compare the carbon dioxide emissions of the countries and areas, I have removed the data from the 5 continents, the breakdown of the countries by income level, and other unrelated data. Before the visualization, this is important to understand the visualization purpose. I drew the square to express the quantity of carbon dioxide emissions, and I also use the colors to show the level of carbon dioxide emissions. Now I'm going to explain why. We're going to show the ranks of the carbon dioxide emissions of these countries and areas. So this is straightforward to show them by the size of the square. About the comparison between the square and map, the map is good for showing the location, but it makes comparing carbon dioxide emissions more difficult because you have to find the locations of the numbers and the colors on the map. But I think this is better to combine them. About the map calibration tips, to add more helpful information, I set the colors to show the level of carbon dioxide emission directly, and I use the world average as a dividing line of red and blue. And I also choose the carbon dioxide percentage, which is easier to read and compare than the numbers. So, what can we get from the visualization? Number 1, mainland China, the USA, and India rank top 3. Number 2, the carbon dioxide emissions of the top 3 are almost at twice those of the rest of the world. Number 3, mainland China's carbon dioxide emissions are about twice as high as the USA's. So are the USA and India. Number 4, about 95% of the countries have carbon dioxide above the world average. To make the conclusion, without the willingness and action of these 3 industrial blocks, humans will not be able to become carbon neutral and prevent severe climate change.
Jun, and my part is the second one is which country emitted the most in total. And you can see in the PPTs, there are so many countries emitted the CO2, and I used the filter about the country and marks at the sum of the CO2. So my conclusion is the top 3 countries which emitted the most is China, Russia, and Japan. As the economy recovers from the new coal epidemic, consumption of coal, which emitted a large amount of carbon dioxide, has soared. So due to the China is the biggest one, I would like to say the reasons because China is rapidly return to work and production from epidemic and it therefore produce more greenhouse gases. So I would like to give some advice, suggestion about it. It's reducing fossil fuel emissions, increase green energy usage, and develop new energy resources.
Thank you, Jun. Next, I want to first introduce how carbon dioxide emission per capita is calculated. It is the contribution of the average citizen of each country by dividing its total emissions by its population. Sometimes total emissions do not tell the whole story. Our per capita view offers an important perspective on the global carbon dioxide challenge, with 1970 to 2020 set as the time frame to answer the question with which country emit the most carbon dioxide per capita. We drew a bar chart of the top 10 countries with most sum per capita in the latest 50 years. From the bar chart, we can clearly see that all 10 countries have quite high carbon dioxide per capita above other countries. Qatar is top one with 3288 tons per capita. The reasons behind Qatar is the largest liquefied natural gas, known as LNG, producer in the world, which relies heavily on export of oil and gas. And it also has a relatively small population. Not surprisingly, United States came as the top two country in the chart. The possible reasons are that human activities involve burning fossil fuels for electricity, heat, and transportation. It reflects the high incomes and spending power impact and the country's high dependency on imported fossil fuels. The rest developed countries in this chart, like Australia and Canada, also have high carbon dioxide emissions per capita, with the same reasons as US. The other developing countries in this chart, like Brunei, Trinidad, and Tobago, are also countries with large petrochemical production for oil and gas. Given the current and historical link between economic and emissions growth, developing countries' carbon dioxide per capita emissions will still be rising because of the economic progress as the developed countries have shown. These alarming messages highlight an obvious need for both developed and developing countries to accelerate the pace of their per capita reductions and develop technological and financial support necessary to transition towards green, low carbon development trajectories. So next, Natasha will talk about the relationship between wealth and carbon dioxide emission.
The next visualization will answer the question, does wealth influence carbon dioxide emissions? So the purpose here is we want to see whether there is correlation between carbon dioxide emissions and poverty. So we use two line graphs with the same x-axis because it is simpler and clearer for audience. The interpretation here is we can see in the graph that the largest reduction in China's poverty is occurring alongside the tremendous increase in carbon dioxide emission. This clearly showed that there is negative correlation between carbon dioxide and poverty in China, which is the largest carbon dioxide emitter currently. But we want to know more, so we also want to compare between proportion of carbon dioxide emission and population by country's income category. And we use two stacked bar charts because it can give a direct sense of comparison between both proportion and population. For the interpretation here, we can see lower middle income and low-income countries accommodate 40% of population but only contribute to 10% of carbon dioxide emissions, while higher-income countries emit more regardless the number of their population. This clearly shows wealth is one of the influence of carbon footprint. Lastly, we come to the conclusion slide that will answer the question, who should take responsibility and how? Based on previous visualization, we can see that both developed and developing countries are all responsible. However, climate change is a global problem and no country alone can fix it. Who is responsible is not the main important here, but what is important is how can we solve it? The solution is richest countries must develop low-cost and low-carbon solutions and spread around the world. These technologies have to be available globally and cheaply. But are we getting there? To answer it, we create visualization to see the trend and compare costs of energy by technologies and across the years. And we use line chart for easy interpretation and simpler representation. As we can see here that costs of low carbon energy are decreasing over the years, which is a good news, but this technology have to be adopted as soon as possible. Rich and developed countries should be the pioneer, and the rest of the world would eventually have to follow in order to continue global trading. And that is how we combat climate change together. That's all from Team 5. Thank you.